Let's bring in Mollie Hemingway, Fox News contributor, senior editor at The Federalist, and she was giggling during that story about Sean Spicer.
Yeah, I voted for Sean 10 times last night.
I thought so. Mollie, how did you have the free time, which you did this weekend, legitimately, realistically change the direction of a story? I mean, before you got involved, all these presidential candidates were calling for an impeachment of Justice Kavanaugh.
Well, it just shows the importance of actually knowing what you're talking about, and I was able to read that book, so I knew that they had left out the most important piece of information, and they should have included it in their story. There's no defense for not including the fact that their supposed allegation against Kavanaugh was based on a false premise. The woman involved says she had no recollection of it.
I thought what was most important this weekend, you want to hear from those writers and why they left certain information out. They had an explanation. There are two women from New York Times that wrote this article based on that book. Robin Pogrebin and then Kate Kelly. Here is Robin speaking about what was taken out of her original article, she says. Listen.
We had her name, and you know, the Times doesn't usually include the name of the victim. And so I think in this case, the editors felt like maybe it was probably better to remove it. And in removing her name, they removed the other reference to the fact that she didn't remember it. So I think it was just sort of an editing, you know, done in the haste, in the editing process.
Were you involved in the decision to amend this and do the correction on, or the addition online to the piece?
We felt like there was so much heat. You know, there's so much, everyone has been kind of seizing on various aspects of this that we certainly didn't want this to be an issue anymore, and we certainly never intended to mislead in any way.
Mollie, they never intended to mislead, and the editors were just acting in haste. They happened to forget to put in her friend said, or they actually took it out. Her friend said that she had no recollection of the event. She declined to be interviewed, and the female's name.
Yes, so I do agree that the editors are also responsible. It shouldn't just be the reporters, but really the entire institution is to blame, and they shouldn't just pass it off on the reporters. Having said that, in an NPR interview that aired yesterday, these reporters did the exact same thing. They made it sound like they had a credible story about a woman, and they hid the fact that the woman denied it ever happening.
Really?
You cannot blame that on editors. Yep. It's an hour-long interview, plenty of time to discuss it.
So she's really dumping on the editor of the opinion section of the Times, because saying I put it in there and they cut it out in haste when she was probably selling that angle. Now, there's a report today, the New York Times news section walked away from the story. They said that there wasn't enough in it. That's how it ended up in the opinion section. And the Washington Post said we had it a year ago, not enough there to print it. What does that say to you?
Well, I mean, I think that's obvious that there's not enough there to go into a news section, and it really says something about what their standards were in reporting this. Now, I recently wrote a book on the Kavanaugh confirmation, Justice on Trial. We interviewed more than 100 people. We got all of our facts right. We didn't traffic in gossip, and we told the accurate story of what happened. So I know it can be done, and there's no excuse for how they did this.
You know, Mollie, though, this gives ammunition to the president and the president's supporters to say, hey, look, the New York Times are out to get me and my guys.
I mean, yes, that does give ammunition, because it's absolutely true that they're running some kind of campaign against this man, and that they're unwilling to let it go. And even though they did correct their story to admit that the entire premise was false, they kept going yesterday. They're still running stories about impeachment, which is really an absurd idea. At some point, decent people are going to have to stand up against this. I mean, it is worth noting that no one's been held accountable for what's been done to this man. No one on the Senate Judiciary Committee was held accountable for their violation of norms. The attorneys who lied to their clients were not held accountable. The criminal referrals that were sent to the Department of Justice for false statements, no action has been taken on them. And the media keep being allowed to continue in this smear campaign. I think decent people, regardless of their politics, are just looking at this and saying, is there no end to this? When will they stop?
Mollie, to one of your last points, the criminal referrals that were made to the Department of Justice, people who, you know, supposedly were not factual in their testimony. You know, is there no consequence for lying in front of Congress?
Apparently not, because those referrals were made and there's no indication of any action. I actually put in...
Why is that?
I actually requested to find out from the Department of Justice if any action had been taken, and have not heard back of any action taken. It is important that people be held accountable for making false statements, but not just the people who made false statements, but the people who trafficked in them. There were senators who violated committee norms and procedures. There's a new chairman of that committee, Lindsey Graham. He did a really interesting thing during the hearing. He said something that people found really interesting, but no action has been taken. There are so many things you could be doing to investigate just how that letter leaked, or why people violated norms and procedures. And those things are important to do.
Do you know what they're focusing on now? The FBI didn't do a thorough investigation in the extra 2 weeks before they voted. Remember when Flake got together with Coons and they decided to not vote and put it off for a week? Now
Yes.
That's the focus.
They're actually saying that someone should be impeached because the FBI didn't investigate a situation where a woman says she was not the victim of any crime. That doesn't make any sense, and there should be tough questions asked of people who even make that sound like that's a legitimate thing to do. I realize that it was difficult for a certain group of people to lose the 2016 election, but what has happened in the intervening years is a temper tantrum that just refuses to accept that reality, whether it's the Russia hoax or the Kavanaugh hoax or whatever the next hoax is going to be. And so people need to be held accountable when they perpetrate these kinds of things against the American people.
Or else it'll never stop. And FBI Director Wray is going to be on Capitol Hill in October, and you know all the questions are going to be about this. Even though we're in the middle of this little problem we're having with Iran, and there's so many international challenges that we have.
Well, Wray should be asked some questions about what the FBI was doing over the course of the last few years, but I would say focus on, again, the Russia hoax and that agency's role in perpetuating it.
All these investigations. Thank you so much, Mollie. Good job.
Thank you.
Mollie's book is called Justice on Trial.
Yeah, if you want to see an accurate story, that's it.